The sound of her sobs carried across the evening stillness like a wounded bird's cry, and Jackson Kane reined his horse to a stop on the dusty trail outside Genoa, Nevada, wondering what kind of trouble had found its way into this remote stretch of the Sierra Nevada foothills in the summer of 1872. He had been riding for 3 days straight from Carson City, his muscles aching and his throat parched, but something about those broken sounds made him forget his own exhaustion. The sun was dropping behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and there beneath a twisted juniper tree knelt a woman in a faded calico dress, her head bowed and her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Jackson dismounted slowly, not wanting to startle her, his boots making soft, crunching sounds on the rocky ground. He could hear her words now, whispered prayers that tumbled out between gasping breaths, asking for strength she clearly did not feel, begging for help she did not think would come. His heart twisted in his chest because he recognized that kind of desperation, had felt it himself after his parents died in a fire 5 years ago, leaving him alone at 20 years old to make his way in an unforgiving world. "Madam," he said quietly, keeping his distance, "are you hurt?" She jerked upright, her eyes wide with fear, and he saw tear tracks cutting through the dust on her cheeks. She was young, probably no more than 22 or 23, with dark auburn hair that had come loose from its pins and eyes the color of spring grass. Even in her distress, there was something striking about her, a stubborn set to her jaw that suggested she was not used to being broken down this way. "Stay back," she said, her voice shaking. "I have nothing worth stealing." "I am not here to rob you," Jackson said, holding up his hands to show they were empty. "I heard you crying and thought you might need help." She studied him for a long moment, taking in his worn denim pants, his dusty hat, the gun on his hip that he had not reached for. Whatever she saw in his face must have reassured her because some of the tension left her shoulders, and she slumped back against the tree trunk. "I do not know if anyone can help me," she whispered. "My husband died 3 weeks ago. Fever took him in 2 days, and I have been trying to run our ranch by myself ever since. The cattle need tending, the fences need mending, and yesterday I found out that the bank in Genoa is going to foreclose on our land if I cannot make the payment by the end of the month. I have been praying for strength to figure out what to do, but I feel like I have nothing left inside me." Jackson felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of pain that mirrored his own past struggles. He had spent years drifting from ranch to ranch, working as a hired hand, never staying anywhere long because putting down roots meant risking loss again. But looking at this woman, seeing the way she was trying so hard to hold herself together even as she fell apart, he felt an unfamiliar pull to stay, to help, to be the answer to a prayer he had not known was being spoken. "Lean on mine until you find your own again," he said. She looked up at him, confusion crossing her features. "What? Your strength? You asked God for strength, and maybe he sent me along this road at this exact time for a reason. Lean on my strength until you find your own again. I am a good hand with cattle, and I know my way around a ranch. Let me help you make that payment and save your land." "I cannot pay you," she said, her voice barely audible. "I have almost nothing left." "Room and board is payment enough for now," Jackson replied. "I have been on the trail a long time, and a bed and hot meals sound like luxury to me." She searched his face again, and he met her gaze steadily, letting her see that he meant what he said. Finally, she nodded, just a small dip of her chin, and tried to push herself to her feet. Her legs must have been numb from kneeling so long because she swayed, and Jackson stepped forward quickly to catch her elbow, steadying her. "Thank you," she whispered. "My name is Amelia Jensen. The ranch is about 2 miles north of here, just off the main road to Genoa. Jackson Kane, he said. Let me help you onto my horse. You look about ready to collapse, and walking 2 miles is not going to help matters. She did not argue, which told him just how exhausted she truly was. He lifted her onto his mare, a sturdy bay named Copper, then swung up behind her. Amelia sat stiffly at first, clearly uncomfortable with the proximity. But as they started moving and her exhaustion won out, she gradually relaxed back against his chest. Jackson tried not to notice the way she fit perfectly in the circle of his arms, or how her hair smelled faintly of lavender despite the dust of the trail. The Jensen ranch, when they reached it, was smaller than he had expected but well maintained, with a neat cabin made of rough-hewn logs and a barn that had seen better days but was still standing. He could see about 30 head of cattle grazing in a nearby pasture and several chickens pecking around the yard. It was the kind of place that could support a small family if managed carefully, the kind of place Jackson had dreamed about owning himself someday. He helped Amelia down from the horse, and she led him inside the cabin, lighting an oil lamp that cast warm shadows across the single room. There was a bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, a wood stove, and shelves lined with dishes and supplies. Everything was clean and organized, showing that even in her grief and exhaustion, Amelia had been trying to keep things together. "You can sleep in the barn," she said, her voice still shaky. "There is a small loft with some old blankets. It is not much, but it should be comfortable enough." "That will be fine," Jackson assured her. "But first, when did you last eat a proper meal?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again, clearly trying to remember. That told him everything he needed to know. "Sit down," he said gently, guiding her to one of the chairs. "Let me fix you something. You do not have to, I know I do not have to, but you are not going to be any good to anyone if you waste away to nothing. Now sit." She sat, and Jackson set about exploring what was available. He found eggs, some dried beef, half a loaf of bread that was still reasonably fresh, and some potatoes. Within 20 minutes he had cooked up a simple but hearty meal, and he set a full plate in front of Amelia before making one for himself. She ate slowly at first, as if she had forgotten how, but then hunger took over and she finished everything on her plate. Some color came back into her cheeks and her hands stopped trembling quite so badly. "Thank you," she said when she was done. "I have been so focused on trying to keep everything running that I have been forgetting to take care of myself." "That ends now," Jackson said firmly. "Tomorrow we will assess what needs to be done and make a plan. But tonight, you need to rest. When did you last sleep through the night?" "I do not remember that either," she admitted with a weak smile. "Then go to bed. I will take care of the animals and make sure everything is secured for the night." "Jackson," she said, and hearing his name in her voice made something warm bloom in his chest. "Why are you doing this?" "You do not know me. I could be anyone." He thought about that for a moment, wanting to give her an honest answer. Maybe because someone should have stopped to help me when I needed it, and they did not. Maybe because letting good people lose everything when I have the ability to prevent it does not sit right with me. Or maybe because when I heard you praying, it felt like I was meant to be there. I am not a particularly religious man, Mrs. Jensen, but I believe in doing right by people when I can. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they seemed different, less hopeless. "I am grateful, more than I can say. Get some rest," he said softly. "Everything will look better in the morning." He left her then, stepping out into the cool evening air. The sky had darkened to deep indigo, scattered with stars that seemed close enough to touch. Jackson tended to Copper first, making sure she had water and feed, then checked on the milk cow in the barn, the chickens in their coop, and walked the fence line closest to the buildings. Everything was quiet except for the distant sound of cattle lowing and the whisper of wind through the sage. That night, lying in the barn loft on surprisingly comfortable blankets, Jackson stared up at the rough wood of the ceiling and wondered what he had gotten himself into. He had offered to help a stranger, a widow in distress, but he had not expected to feel this immediate connection, this pull toward Amelia Jensen that went beyond simple compassion. She was grieving her husband, for God's sake, and here he was noticing the color of her eyes and the way she said his name. He needed to keep his distance emotionally, help her save the ranch, and then move on like he always did. But even as he told himself that, he knew something had shifted the moment he heard her prayers. Morning came too early, with roosters crowing and sunlight streaming through the cracks in the barn walls. Jackson washed up using the pump behind the cabin, then knocked on the door. Amelia answered looking more rested than she had the night before, though her eyes were still shadowed with grief. "I made coffee," she said, "and there is bread and jam if you are hungry." They ate together at the small table, and Jackson asked her to explain the full situation. Amelia laid it out in a steady voice, though he could hear the fear underneath. Her husband Thomas had purchased the ranch 3 years ago with money borrowed from the Genoa Bank. They had been making the payments regularly, but Thomas's death had left her with not only grief, but also a $200 payment due in 3 weeks. She had perhaps $50 saved, and while the cattle could be sold, it would take time to arrange a sale for a fair price. "The banker, Mr. Whitmore, told me that if I cannot make the payment by August 15th, he will have no choice but to foreclose," she said quietly. He was not unkind about it, but business is business. Jackson did some quick calculations in his head. "How much could you get for 10 head of cattle if we sold them quickly?" "Maybe $12 to $15 each if I am lucky," Amelia replied. "Thomas sold some last year for about that, but finding buyers on short notice is difficult. What if we drove them to Carson City? There is always demand there, and we might get better prices with more buyers." "That is 2 days there and 2 days back, and we would have to leave the ranch unattended for nearly a week," she said, worry creasing her forehead. "We could ask one of your neighbors to keep an eye on things," Jackson suggested. "Surely someone would be willing to help." Amelia's expression darkened. "The nearest neighbor is Harold Pritchard, and he has been trying to buy this land from me since the day Thomas died. He wants to expand his holdings, and he sees my situation as an opportunity. I do not trust him near my property when I am not here. Are there no other neighbors, no friends in town?" "There is Martha Donnelly, who runs the general store in Genoa. She has been kind to me. But she has her own business to run and cannot spare the time to watch over a ranch." Jackson nodded, thinking. "Then we need another plan. What about taking on extra work? Is there anything you could do to earn money quickly?" "I am a fair seamstress," Amelia said. "But there is no time to complete enough work to make the kind of money I need." They sat in silence for a moment, and then an idea struck Jackson. "What about the cattle we keep? Could you manage with fewer head? If we sold 15 instead of 10, and I contributed what I have saved, we might get close to what you need." "I cannot take your savings," Amelia protested. "You have already done so much. Consider it an investment," Jackson said. "I am not exactly swimming in cash, but I have about $40 put by from my last job. Combined with the cattle sale, we might just make it. And in the meantime, I will work on improving the ranch, fixing fences and making repairs that will increase the property value. That way, you will have a better operation going forward, and I will know my money went towards something worthwhile." Amelia looked at him for a long moment, and he saw emotions flickering across her face too quickly to identify them all. Finally, She reached across the table and placed her hand over his, a simple gesture that sent warmth rushing through his entire body. "I do not know how I will ever repay you," she said. "You do not have to repay me. Just let me help." They spent the rest of that day planning. Jackson rode the property lines, assessing the fences and making notes of what needed repair. The ranch was about 160 acres, with good grazing land and access to a creek that ran year-round. It had solid potential, and he could see why Thomas Jensen had invested in it. Amelia spent the day catching up on household tasks and preparing supplies for the trip to Carson City they would make the following week. Over the next several days, they fell into a rhythm. Jackson rose at dawn and worked on the ranch, mending fences, checking cattle, and making improvements. Amelia cooked meals, tended the garden, and handled the chickens and milk cow. They ate breakfast and dinner together, and those shared meals became Jackson's favorite part of each day. He learned that Amelia had grown up in Sacramento, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a shopkeeper. She had met Thomas at a church social when she was 19, and he had swept her off her feet with promises of a new life in Nevada. "He was a good man," she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Kind and hardworking, but I think he was lonely too, even with me." He did not talk much about what he was feeling, just kept everything inside and worked himself nearly to exhaustion trying to make this place successful. "It sounds like the fever did not have to work very hard to take him down if he was already worn out," Jackson observed gently. "I tried to get him to slow down, but he would not listen. He said we had to make the payments, had to prove we could make it out here. And now he is gone and I am left trying to finish what he started, but I do not know if I have the strength." "You have more strength than you think," Jackson said. "You have been running this place alone for 3 weeks, which is no small feat, and you are still standing, still fighting. That takes courage." "I do not feel courageous. I feel terrified most of the time." "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs to be done despite being afraid." She turned to look at him, and in the fading light her eyes seemed to glow. "Where did you learn to be so wise?" "Hard experience," he said with a slight smile. "I have made plenty of mistakes and had to learn from them. Lost my parents when I was 20 and spent a few years feeling sorry for myself and drifting aimlessly. Finally realized that sitting around waiting for life to get better was not going to work. Had to take action, even when I was scared." "I am sorry about your parents," Amelia said softly. "What happened?" "Fire. Our house burned down one night while I was in town. By the time I got back, there was nothing left but ashes and memories. Never did find out what started it, but it took everything I had in the world except the clothes on my back and my horse." "That is terrible. Were you close to them?" "Very. My mother taught me to read and cook and see the beauty in small things. My father taught me to work with my hands and treat people fairly. They were good people, and losing them nearly destroyed me. But eventually, I realized that the best way to honor them was to live the kind of life they would have been proud of. So I am trying to do that, one day at a time." Amelia was quiet for a moment, then said, "Thomas was not a bad husband, but he was not much for deep conversation. I appreciate being able to talk with you like this. It makes me feel less alone." Jackson wanted to reach over and take her hand, but he held himself back. She was still mourning her husband, and he had no right to complicate her grief with his growing feelings. Instead, he said, "I am glad I can provide some company along with the manual labor." She smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face, and Jackson felt his heart skip a beat. He was in trouble, he realized. Deep trouble. Because he was falling for Amelia Jensen, and there was no fence he could mend or cattle he could herd that would fix that particular problem. The following Monday, they set out for Carson City with 15 head of cattle. It was slow going, keeping the animals together on the road. But Jackson had done this kind of work before, and Amelia proved to be a capable rider. They reached Carson City late on Tuesday, both of them dusty and exhausted, and found lodging at a modest hotel that catered to ranchers bringing stock to market. The next day they went to the stockyards, where buyers gathered to assess animals and make offers. Jackson did most of the negotiating, his experience showing as he parried lowball offers and held out for fair prices. By late afternoon, they had sold all 15 head for an average of $14 each, bringing in $210. Amelia counted the money 3 times, her hands shaking slightly, then looked up at Jackson with tears in her eyes. "We did it. With what I have saved and your contribution, we can make the payment and have a little left over." "We did it," Jackson agreed, feeling a surge of satisfaction. "Your ranch is safe, Amelia." She threw her arms around him before he could react, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you so much." Jackson held her carefully, aware that they were standing in the middle of a busy stockyard with people watching, but not really caring. She felt perfect in his arms, like she belonged there, and when she finally pulled back, he had to resist the urge to pull her right back. They celebrated that night with dinner at a real restaurant, a luxury neither had enjoyed in weeks. Amelia wore a clean dress she had brought, and with her hair properly pinned up and her face free of trail dust, she was breathtaking. Jackson found himself tongue-tied, struggling to maintain normal conversation when all he wanted to do was tell her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, catching him staring. "Just that it is good to see you smiling," he said, which was true even if it was not the whole truth. "You look happy." "I feel happy for the first time since Thomas died. I have been so worried about losing everything, and now that worry is gone. I can breathe again. What will you do now?" Jackson asked, even though part of him did not want to know the answer. "Will you keep running the ranch?" "I think so," Amelia said slowly. "It is what Thomas wanted, and I have put so much into this place already. It would feel wrong to give it up now, but I cannot do it alone. I will need to hire help." "I could stay on," Jackson offered, trying to keep his voice casual. "At least through the fall, make sure you are set up for winter. You could pay me a regular wage once you get back on your feet financially." Amelia studied him across the table, and he wondered what she saw. "You would do that. Stay and work for me. I have no other pressing plans," he said. "And I would like to see this through, make sure the ranch really does become successful." "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much." They returned to the ranch 3 days later, stopping at the bank in Genoa on the way. Mr. Whitmore, a portly man with mutton-chop whiskers, seemed surprised to see them. "Mrs. Jensen," he said, "I did not expect you so soon. The payment is not due until next week." "I know," Amelia said, and Jackson heard the pride in her voice. "But I prefer not to wait. I have the full amount owed." She counted out $200 in cash, and Jackson watched as Mr. Whitmore's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. The banker made a notation in his ledger, then wrote out a receipt showing the payment had been made in full and the loan was current. "Very good, Mrs. Jensen. Very good indeed. I am pleased to see you managing so well despite your recent loss." "I have had help," Amelia said, glancing at Jackson. "Good help." When they left the bank, Amelia was practically glowing. "I need to stop at the general store," she said. "I want to thank Martha for her kindness, and I need to pick up a few supplies." Martha Donnelly turned out to be a plump, cheerful woman in her 40s who greeted Amelia with genuine warmth. "Amelia, dear, how are you managing?" "Much better, thanks to Mr. Kane here. We just made the bank payment and the ranch is safe." Martha turned shrewd eyes on Jackson. "Is that so? And who might you be, Mr. Kane?" Just someone who happened along at the right time, Jackson said. I am working for Mrs. Jensen now, helping her keep the ranch running. Well, that is good to hear. This poor girl has been through enough. Martha patted Amelia's hand, then leaned in conspiratorially. And he is not hard to look at, is he, Martha? Amelia's cheeks flushed pink, and Jackson had to bite back a grin. I am just saying what everyone is thinking, dear. Now, what can I get for you today? As Amelia placed her order, Jackson wandered around the store, looking at the various goods on display. He found himself thinking about what it would be like to stay in Genoa permanently, to make a real life here instead of always moving on. The idea was appealing, but it depended entirely on whether Amelia would want him to stay beyond the fall, and whether his feelings for her would remain unrequited. They rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence, the late afternoon sun warm on their backs. Jackson found himself noticing small things. The way Amelia sat her horse with unconscious grace, how she hummed softly to herself when she was happy, the delicate line of her profile against the Nevada sky. He was in deep, he realized, far deeper than was wise. Over the following weeks, they worked together to improve the ranch. Jackson repaired all the fences, replaced rotted boards in the barn, and built a proper chicken coop that would protect the birds from predators. Amelia planted a larger garden, put up preserves for winter, and began taking in some sewing work from women in town to bring in extra income. They were building something together, and the satisfaction Jackson felt was unlike anything he had experienced in his years of drifting. But there was also tension, a growing awareness between them that neither seemed willing to address. Jackson would catch Amelia watching him as he worked, and she would quickly look away when their eyes met. Their hands would brush when passing tools or dishes, and the contact would linger just a moment too long. He wanted to say something, to tell her how he felt, but the shadow of Thomas Jensen still hung over the ranch, and he did not want to disrespect her mourning. One evening in late August, a storm rolled in from the mountains, bringing lightning that split the sky and thunder that shook the cabin. Amelia had always been nervous during storms, she had told him, and tonight was no exception. Jackson was in the barn when he heard her cry out, and he ran to the cabin to find her standing in the doorway, her face pale. "Sorry," she said, trying to smile. "I know it is silly, but storms frighten me." "Nothing silly about it," Jackson said. "Everyone is afraid of something." "Do you want company?" She nodded gratefully, and he followed her inside. They sat at the table and Jackson made coffee while the storm raged outside. Lightning flashed through the windows, casting everything in stark white light for brief moments before plunging back into shadow. "Thomas used to hold me during storms," Amelia said quietly. "I felt safer with him there." "I am sorry he is not here for you now," Jackson said, meaning it. "So am I, but I am also grateful that you are." She looked up at him, and in the lamplight her eyes were dark and serious. "Jackson, I need to tell you something." His heart began to pound. "All right." "I have been thinking a lot lately about everything that has happened since Thomas died, about how lost I felt, how alone. And then you appeared like an answer to my prayers, and you have given me so much. Your time, your money, your strength. You have asked for nothing in return except room and board, and you have treated me with kindness and respect every single day. Amelia, please, let me finish. I have also been noticing the way you look at me sometimes, when you think I am not paying attention. And I have been feeling things I did not expect to feel, things that confuse me, because I am supposed to be mourning my husband. But the truth is, Jackson, my marriage to Thomas was comfortable, but it was not passionate. We cared for each other, but we were never truly in love. I thought that was enough, thought that was how marriage was supposed to be. But then you came along and I started to wonder if maybe I had been settling for less than I deserved. Jackson could barely breathe. What are you saying? I am saying that I have feelings for you, strong feelings. And I do not know if that makes me a terrible person, being interested in another man so soon after losing my husband. But I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel. He reached across the table and took both her hands in his. You are not a terrible person. You are an amazing woman who has been through something incredibly difficult, and you are still standing, still fighting. As for your feelings, Amelia, I have been half in love with you since the first night I spent in your barn. I just did not want to push you or make you uncomfortable. Half in love? She asked with a trembling smile. Fine, more than half. All the way in love, if I am being honest. I love the way you hum when you are happy and the way you stick your tongue out slightly when you are concentrating. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you smile when you think no one is looking. I have been trying not to love you, but it turns out I am not very good at that. Tears were streaming down Amelia's face now, but she was smiling. I love you too. I think I have been falling for you since you told me to lean on your strength, but I was too afraid to admit it. You do not have to be afraid, Jackson said gently. Not of this. He stood and moved around the table, and when he reached her, she rose to meet him. Their kiss was tender at first, tentative, and then it deepened as weeks of suppressed feelings poured out. Jackson wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as thunder rolled overhead and rain hammered against the roof. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Stay with me tonight, Amelia whispered. I do not want to be alone. Are you sure? Jackson asked. I do not want you to do anything you are not ready for, I am sure. I need you, Jackson, not just tonight, but every night. I want you to stay here permanently, not just until fall. I want to build a life with you if you want that too. I want nothing more, he said, and kissed her again. That night, as the storm raged outside, they became lovers in truth. Jackson was gentle with her, taking his time, wanting their first joining to be something she would remember with joy. Amelia responded to him with a passion that surprised them both, and afterward, as they lay tangled together in her bed, Jackson felt a contentment he had never known before. I never knew it could be like this, Amelia murmured against his chest. Thomas was always quick and businesslike. I thought that was normal. You deserve so much better than normal, Jackson said, running his fingers through her hair. You deserve amazing. I think I found it, she said, and fell asleep in his arms. The next morning, Jackson woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Amelia's head on his shoulder. He lay still for a while, just watching her sleep, marveling at the fact that this incredible woman loved him. Eventually, she stirred and opened her eyes, and when she saw him, her face lit up with a smile that made his heart ache. Good morning, she said. Good morning, beautiful. They made love again in the soft morning light, taking their time, exploring each other with growing confidence. Afterward, they dressed and made breakfast together, moving around the small cabin with an ease that came from weeks of shared work and growing intimacy. We should probably talk about what happens now, Amelia said as they ate. People in town are going to notice if you move into the cabin with me, and there will be talk. Then we should get married, Jackson said simply. I know it is fast, but I am certain about you, about us. If you need more time, I will wait as long as you want. But I know what I want, and that is you, for the rest of my life. Amelia set down her fork and looked at him with shining eyes. Are you proposing to me? I suppose I am, though I am doing a terrible job of it since I do not have a ring or any fancy words prepared. I do not need fancy words or a ring. I just need you. She came around the table and sat in his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. Yes, Jackson Kane, I will marry you. They rode into Genoa that afternoon and spoke to Reverend Patterson, who agreed to marry them the following Saturday. The Reverend seemed a bit surprised by the quick courtship, but when he saw the way Jackson and Amelia looked at each other, his concerns appeared to ease. "Love like yours does not come along often," he said. "When it does, you hold on to it with both hands." Martha Donnelly was thrilled when they told her, insisting on helping Amelia find a proper dress for the wedding. "I knew it," she exclaimed. "I knew the moment I saw you two together that something was happening. Oh, this is wonderful." The week leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Jackson used some of his remaining savings to buy a simple gold band from the jeweler in town, and he spent his evenings working on a special project in the barn that he wanted to surprise Amelia with. Amelia sewed herself a new dress, a lovely blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes, and cleaned the cabin until it shone. Saturday dawned clear and beautiful, with the kind of perfect late summer weather that made everything seem possible. The wedding was held in the small church in Genoa, with Martha and her husband as witnesses along with a handful of other townspeople who had befriended Amelia. Jackson wore his best clothes, which were not much but were clean and pressed, and when Amelia walked down the aisle toward him, he felt his breath catch in his throat. She was radiant, her face glowing with happiness, and when she reached him and took his hand, Jackson knew he was the luckiest man alive. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, and when Reverend Patterson pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson kissed Amelia with all the love he felt, not caring who was watching. They celebrated afterward with a meal at the hotel, Martha having organized everything with her usual efficiency. People congratulated them and wished them well, and Jackson felt welcomed in a way he had not experienced since before his parents died. These people were accepting him as one of their own, and it felt good. It felt like home. That evening, they returned to the ranch as husband and wife. Jackson helped Amelia down from the wagon, then lifted her in his arms and carried her across the threshold of the cabin, both of them laughing. "Wait," he said, setting her down. "I have something to show you before we go to bed." He led her out to the barn and lit a lantern, revealing what he had been working on in secret. It was a cradle, beautifully crafted from pine, with smooth lines and careful joinery. Amelia gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. "Jackson, it is beautiful. When did you make this?" "Late at night after you were asleep. I wanted you to have it for when we start a family. I know we have not talked about children yet, but I hope you want them, because I would love to have a family with you." "I want that too," Amelia said, tears streaming down her face for what felt like the 100th time that day. "I want everything with you." They made love that night as husband and wife, and it was even better than before, the commitment they had made adding depth and meaning to every touch, every kiss. Jackson took his time, wanting to give Amelia pleasure, wanting her to understand through his actions how much he cherished her. When they finally lay spent in each other's arms, both were smiling. "I never knew life could be this good," Amelia whispered. "Neither did I," Jackson admitted, "but I am going to spend every day making sure it stays this way. You do not have to be perfect, you know. We will have hard days and disagreements like every married couple. I know, but I promise to always listen to you, always respect you, and always work to make our marriage strong. That is all I can offer." "That is everything I need," she said, and kissed him. The fall passed in a golden haze of happiness. Jackson and Amelia worked the ranch together, building up their cattle herd with careful purchases and preparing for winter. They fell into comfortable routines, but the passion between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger as they learned each other's bodies and preferences, as they became more confident and playful with each other. In late October, Amelia realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first she did not say anything, afraid to hope, but when she missed a second time and began feeling queasy in the mornings, she told Jackson. His reaction was everything she could have wanted, sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around, both of them laughing and crying at once. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Amelia asked, even though she could see the answer on his face. Happy does not begin to cover it. "I am overwhelmed, terrified, and more excited than I have ever been in my life." They began preparing in earnest then, Jackson moving the cradle into the cabin and starting work on an addition to the small house that would give them a separate bedroom and a nursery. Amelia sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands moving with practiced skill, even as she marveled at how small everything was. Winter came to Nevada with snow that turned the landscape into something magical. Jackson made sure they had plenty of firewood stacked and supplies laid in, and during the long cold evenings, they sat by the fire together, talking about their future and the baby that was growing inside Amelia. He would place his hand on her belly and talk to the child, telling stories and making promises about all the things they would do together. "What if I am not a good father?" he asked one night, voicing a fear that had been gnawing at him. "What if I make mistakes?" "You will make mistakes," Amelia said practically. "All parents do, but you will also be kind and patient and loving because that is who you are. Our child will be lucky to have you as a father." "Our child will be lucky to have you as a mother," Jackson countered. "You are going to be amazing." By the time spring arrived in 1873, Amelia was heavily pregnant and moving slowly. Jackson took over more of the daily ranch work, insisting that she rest and focus on staying healthy. Martha visited regularly, bringing food and checking on Amelia's progress, and as the due date approached, she arranged for the local midwife, Mrs. Chen, to be on standby. The baby decided to arrive on a beautiful morning in early May. Amelia's water broke just after breakfast, and Jackson rode into town at a gallop to fetch Mrs. Chen. The labor was long and difficult, and Jackson paced outside the cabin, feeling helpless and terrified as he listened to Amelia's cries. Martha stayed with her, offering support and encouragement, while Mrs. Chen worked with calm efficiency. Finally, as the sun was setting, a baby's cry split the air. Jackson burst into the cabin to find Amelia exhausted but smiling, holding a red-faced, squalling infant. "You have a son," Martha announced, beaming. "A healthy, strong boy." Jackson approached slowly, almost afraid to believe it was real. Mrs. Chen had cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, and when Jackson got his first good look at his son, he felt tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He has your nose," Amelia said, her voice tired but filled with love. "And look at all that dark hair." Jackson sat carefully on the edge of the bed and Amelia placed the baby in his arms. The infant was so tiny, so fragile, and Jackson felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. This was his son, his family, and he would do anything to keep them safe. "What should we name him?" Amelia asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not decided on anything final. Jackson looked down at the baby, studying the small features, and suddenly knew. "What about James? After my father." "James Kane," Amelia said, trying it out. "I like it. James Thomas Kane, to honor your father and mine." "Perfect," Jackson agreed. Over the following weeks, they adjusted to life with a newborn. James was a good baby overall, though he woke frequently to nurse and had strong opinions about everything. Jackson found himself utterly enchanted, spending hours just watching his son sleep or playing with his tiny fingers. He had never imagined he could love someone as much as he loved Amelia, but James had carved out his own space in Jackson's heart. Amelia recovered from the birth with Martha's help, and by midsummer, she was back to her normal activities, though they had hired a young man from town to help with some of the heavier ranch work so she could spend more time with James. The ranch was doing well, the cattle healthy and the land productive, and they were able to make their bank payment with money to spare. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching James sleep in his cradle, Amelia said, "Do you remember the night you found me praying?" "Every detail," Jackson replied. "It was the night that changed my life. Mine too. I was at my lowest point, completely broken, and I asked God for strength. I never imagined He would send me you. I told you to lean on my strength until you found your own again. But the truth is, I have been leaning on yours too. We hold each other up, Amelia. That is what makes us work." "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of the ranch and watching the stars come out. Jackson thought about how far they had both come in the past year, from strangers brought together by chance to a family bound by love. It had not always been easy, but every challenge had been worth it. "What are you thinking about?" Amelia asked. "Just how grateful I am. For you, for James, for this life we have built together. A year ago I was drifting with no purpose or direction. Now I have everything I ever wanted and more." "We should probably start thinking about the future," Amelia said. "James is going to need siblings after all." Jackson grinned. "Is that so? How many siblings were you thinking?" "At least 2 more. I want a big family, children running all over this ranch. What do you think?" "I think that sounds perfect, though we should probably wait until James is sleeping through the night before we start working on number 2. Amelia laughed, the sound ringing out across the evening air. "Practical as always. That is one of the things I love about you." "One of many things, I hope," Jackson teased. "So many things I would need all night to list them." "We have all night," he pointed out. "And many nights after that, we have the rest of our lives." "That we do," Amelia agreed and leaned her head on his shoulder. The years that followed were good ones. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Annie in 1875 and another son, Michael, in 1877. The ranch prospered under their joint management, and they expanded their holdings gradually, always being careful not to overextend themselves financially. Jackson proved to be as good a father as Amelia had predicted, patient and loving with all 3 children, teaching them to ride and work the land while Amelia taught them to read and appreciate music and beauty. They faced challenges, of course. There was a hard winter in 1876 that killed several head of cattle, and Annie had a frightening bout with fever when she was 2 that kept them up for days nursing her back to health. But they faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with his father and learning everything he could about ranching. Annie was bright and curious, always asking questions and exploring every corner of the ranch. Michael was still a baby, but already showing signs of being the wild child of the family, fearless and energetic. On their 5th wedding anniversary in 1878, Jackson took Amelia back to the spot where he had first found her, the twisted juniper tree on the trail outside Genoa. They left the children with Martha for the day and rode out together, taking their time, enjoying the beautiful late summer weather. "You remember what you were praying for that night?" Jackson asked as they stood beneath the tree. "Strength." "I was asking God for the strength to keep going, to figure out what to do. I felt so lost and alone. And I told you to lean on mine until you found your own again. You did, and I did lean on you for a while. But then I found my own strength again, and I realized it was even stronger than before because I had you beside me. We make each other stronger, Jackson." "We do," he agreed, pulling her into his arms. "I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I loved you quite a bit then. I love you more too. You have given me everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know to want. You have made me happier than I ever imagined possible." They kissed beneath the juniper tree, the Nevada sun warm on their backs, and Jackson silently thanked whatever force had guided him down this particular trail on that particular evening 5 years ago. He had been looking for work, for a place to rest, but he had found so much more. He had found home, he had found love, he had found his purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Amelia asked, echoing a question she had asked him countless times over the years. "Just that I am the luckiest man alive," Jackson said, "and wondering what took me so long to find you." "You found me exactly when you were supposed to," Amelia said wisely. "Not a moment too soon or too late. Everything happened the way it needed to happen. I suppose you are right. I am always right," she teased. "You should know that by now. How could I forget?" Jackson laughed and kissed her again. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, racing each other across the open land, laughing like children. When they arrived home, Martha had put all 3 children to bed, and the cabin was quiet. Jackson paid her generously for watching the children and thanked her for being such a good friend. "You two were meant for each other," Martha said as she prepared to leave. "Anyone with eyes can see how much you love each other. It does my heart good." After she left, Jackson and Amelia checked on the sleeping children, pulling blankets up and placing gentle kisses on small foreheads. Then they went to their own bedroom, the addition Jackson had built during Amelia's first pregnancy, and made love with the passion and tenderness that had never faded between them. "You think we made another baby tonight?" Amelia asked afterward, lying in the circle of Jackson's arms. "Would that be a bad thing?" "Not at all. I told you I wanted a big family, though 4 children might be enough." "We will see what God has in mind for us," Jackson said. "I will be happy with whatever comes as long as I have you." "You will always have me," Amelia promised. "For the rest of our lives and beyond." As it turned out, they did have one more child, a daughter born in 1879 that they named Sarah. She was the baby of the family and everyone doted on her, especially her older brothers and sister. The ranch continued to thrive, and by 1880, Jackson and Amelia had paid off their loan to the bank entirely. The land was theirs, free and clear, and they owned nearly 300 head of cattle. They hired additional help as the ranch grew, good men who worked hard and were treated fairly. Jackson made sure to pay decent wages and provide safe working conditions, remembering his own years as a drifter and wanting to be the kind of employer he would have appreciated. Several of their ranch hands stayed on for years, becoming like extended family. As the children grew older, Jackson and Amelia made sure they understood the value of hard work, but also the importance of education and kindness. They taught by example, showing their children what a loving marriage looked like, how partners should treat each other with respect and tenderness. James, Annie, Michael, and Sarah all grew up knowing they were loved and valued, and that security gave them the confidence to face the world. In 1885, when James was 12, a neighboring rancher tried to claim that part of the Kane property belonged to him, citing some obscure boundary dispute. Jackson could have responded with anger or violence, but instead he calmly went to the county office, pulled the original land surveys, and proved beyond doubt that the land was legally his. The neighbor backed down, and Jackson bore him no ill will, even offering to help when the man's barn burned down the following spring. "You could have made an enemy," Amelia said after the dispute was resolved. He tried to steal from us. He was desperate and hoping to take advantage, Jackson replied. But making enemies serves no purpose. Better to show mercy and maybe gain a friend instead. You are a better person than I am, Amelia said, shaking her head. Not better. Just older and maybe slightly wiser. And I learned from the best teacher. Your mother, Jackson said, pulling her close. You have taught me so much about grace and forgiveness and seeing the best in people. I love you, Amelia whispered. I love you too, always. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. Martha Donnelly died in 1887, and they mourned the loss of their dear friend. But there were also celebrations. James fell in love with a girl from town in 1890 and married her the following year, giving Jackson and Amelia their first grandchild in 1892. Annie showed a talent for art and began painting beautiful landscapes of the Nevada countryside. Michael decided he wanted to be a veterinarian and began studying with the local animal doctor. Sarah, the youngest, was still deciding what she wanted to do with her life, but showed promise in everything she attempted. Through it all, Jackson and Amelia remained deeply in love. They still made time for each other despite the demands of the ranch and family, still looked at each other with the same passion that had ignited on that stormy night so many years ago. They had built something lasting and beautiful, a legacy that would continue through their children and grandchildren. On a warm evening in June of 1895, they sat on the porch together watching the sunset, much as they had done countless times before. They were older now, Jackson's hair liberally streaked with gray and lines carved into Amelia's face by years of sun and wind. But to each other, they were still the young people who had fallen in love under a juniper tree. You have any regrets? Amelia asked, taking Jackson's hand. He thought about it seriously, wanting to give her an honest answer. No, he said finally. I regret nothing about our life together. There have been hard times and losses, but they are all part of the tapestry of our life. Every thread is necessary to make the whole picture. I feel the same way. Even losing Thomas, painful as it was, led me to you, and that has been the greatest gift of my life. I am glad I rode down that particular trail on that particular evening, Jackson said. And I am glad I heard you praying. You asked for strength, and God sent you me. But the truth is, He sent you to me too. You have made me stronger and better and more complete than I ever was alone. We complete each other, Amelia agreed. That is what real love is, I think. Not needing someone to survive, but choosing to build a life together because it is richer and fuller that way. When did you get so wise? Jackson teased. I have always been wise. You just took a while to notice. They laughed together, the sound carrying across the ranch they had built with their own hands and hearts. In the distance, they could see James working with his young son, teaching him the same skills Jackson had taught James. The cycle continuing, the legacy living on. What do you think will happen to all of this when we are gone? Amelia asked. The children will carry it on, or they will make their own choices and the land will go to someone else. Either way, what matters is not the land itself but what we built together. The love, the family, the life we created. That will last forever, passed down through generations in stories and memories and the values we taught our children. That is beautiful, Amelia said, tears in her eyes. It is true. You and I, we created something that will outlast both of us. And it all started because I heard a woman praying for strength and offered her mine. The best decision you ever made, Amelia said. The best decision we ever made, Jackson corrected. You could have sent me away that night. You chose to trust me to let me help you. That took courage. Or desperation, Amelia joked. Courage, Jackson insisted. You have always been brave, even when you did not feel like it." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and purple. The evening star appeared, bright and steady in the darkening sky, and Jackson made a wish the way he had done as a child. "What did you wish for?" Amelia asked, catching him. "That is between me and the star," Jackson said. "But I will give you a hint. It involves many more years with you by my side." "That is my wish too," Amelia said softly. "Many more years together, and then whatever comes after." "Together," Jackson agreed. "Always together." They went inside as darkness fell completely, Jackson lighting lamps while Amelia began preparing their evening meal. They moved around each other with the practiced ease of decades together, anticipating each other's needs without words. This was their dance, perfected over 23 years of marriage, and Jackson never tired of it. As they sat down to eat, Jackson looked across the table at his wife and felt his heart swell with love. She was everything to him, his partner, his best friend, his greatest adventure. The ranch, the children, the life they had built, all of it was wonderful, but none of it would have meant anything without her. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "For what?" Amelia asked, puzzled. "For saying yes, for trusting me, for building this life with me. For loving me even when I was not easy to love, for giving me a family and a home and a purpose, for everything." "You do not have to thank me for any of that," Amelia said, reaching across to take his hand. "Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. You make it simple." "I love you," Jackson said, the same 3 words he had spoken thousands of times over the years, but they never lost their meaning. "I love you too," Amelia replied. "Today, tomorrow, and always." They finished their meal and cleaned up together, then stepped back out onto the porch to enjoy the cool evening air. The stars were out in full force now, millions of them scattered across the velvet darkness of the Nevada sky. Jackson wrapped his arm around Amelia's shoulders and she leaned into him, fitting perfectly against his side the way she always had. "Tell me again about the night we met," Amelia said, a request she made occasionally when she wanted to be reminded of their beginning. Jackson smiled and began the story, describing how he had been riding from Carson City, tired and dusty, when he heard her crying. He told her about finding her beneath the juniper tree, about the fear in her eyes that had gradually given way to trust. He described the moment he had offered her his strength and how something had shifted in his chest, a recognition that his life was about to change forever. "I knew even then," he said. "I knew you were special, that helping you was going to mean more than just a few weeks of ranch work. I tried to tell myself to keep my distance, to help you and move on like I always did, but I could not do it. You had captured my heart before I even understood what was happening." "I tried to fight my feelings for you," Amelia admitted. "I thought it was too soon, that I should mourn Thomas longer before allowing myself to care for someone else. But you were so kind, so patient, so genuinely good, I could not help falling in love with you." "Best thing that ever happened to both of us," Jackson said. "Absolutely," Amelia agreed. They stood there together for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars and listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the cattle shifted and settled in their pasture. It was the sound of home, of peace, of a life well lived. Eventually, they went inside to bed, but not before Jackson did what he always did: checked on their sleeping children, even though the older ones were grown and gone, and Sarah was nearly 16 and hardly a child anymore. It was habit, a nightly ritual that brought him comfort. Amelia smiled as she watched him, her heart full of love for this man who had saved her in so many ways. They made love that night with the slow, familiar passion of long married couples who knew every inch of each other's bodies and souls. There was no rush, no desperate need, just the steady warmth of connection and intimacy. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Amelia's head on Jackson's chest, his hand stroking her hair. "You remember what you said to me on our wedding night?" Amelia asked sleepily. "I said a lot of things on our wedding night," Jackson replied with a smile in his voice. "You said you were going to spend every day making sure our life stayed good. You promised to always listen to me, always respect me, and always work to make our marriage strong." "I remember." "You have kept that promise every single day for 23 years. Thank you for that." "Easiest promise I ever kept," Jackson said, kissing the top of her head. "You make it easy to be a good husband." "We make it easy for each other," Amelia murmured, already half asleep. Jackson lay awake a while longer, thinking about all the twists and turns that had brought him to this moment. If he had ridden a different trail that day, if he had been delayed even by an hour, he might have missed hearing Amelia's prayers. Their lives might have gone in completely different directions, and he would never have known the incredible happiness he had found with her. But he had ridden that trail at that exact time, and he had heard her crying, and he had made the choice to stop and help. That single decision had changed everything, had led to this beautiful life filled with love and family and purpose. As he drifted off to sleep, Jackson's last thought was one of gratitude. Gratitude for second chances, for answered prayers, for a woman brave enough to trust a stranger, and for love that had grown stronger with each passing year. They had built something lasting and beautiful together, and he knew that their story would continue through their children and grandchildren, a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. The morning sun rose over the Nevada landscape, bringing with it another beautiful day on the Kane ranch. Jackson and Amelia woke wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had for thousands of mornings before, ready to face whatever the day might bring. Together, always together.